She was the only one in the house. Every morning for 17 days, the chair at her home desk had been rotated 3 inches to the right. Not pushed, turned the way someone leaves a chair when they've been sitting and stood up to go. She lived alone. She set up a camera on a Wednesday. On Thursday morning, she reviewed the footage. At 3:22 a.m., in an empty room, in a house where only she was sleeping, the chair turned. She called her boyfriend and held the phone up so he could watch the clip. He watched it once. He watched it twice. Then he said, "Is that you in the corner?" Drama Vault. 5 stories from the corners of the internet where someone held on to something, a spreadsheet, a voicemail, a letter, a clause, and found out it was the only thing that mattered. In our first story, a payroll assistant receives a formal written warning for clocking in 2 minutes late. She arrives at her HR meeting with a 7-month spreadsheet logging her supervisor's own arrival times. 94 entries. Average delay 11 minutes. In the second, a woman working from home sets up a camera to find out who has been rotating her desk chair 3 inches to the right every night for 17 nights. In the third, a man clearing out his late mother's apartment finds an old phone with 47 unread voice messages, all addressed to the sister who cut off the family 12 years ago. In the fourth, a high school English teacher who failed a student for plagiarism 19 years ago receives a letter from a debut novelist on the bestseller list. In the fifth and final, a senior operations manager who was handed a severance agreement and who had, in her filing cabinet at home, the employment contract the company believed no longer existed. Our first story comes from our /MaliciousCompliance. The narrator, we'll call her Rachel, had worked as a payroll assistant at a regional distribution company for 3 years. Rachel's job was to process timekeeping records and flag discrepancies. She was good at it. She was, by her own description, meticulous. In October of the year, she posted this. Rachel received a formal written warning. The offense. She had clocked in 2 minutes and 14 seconds after her scheduled start time. Her supervisor, we'll call him Marcus, noted that this was her second documented late arrival in 60 days. One more instance, he said, and the matter would go to HR for termination proceedings. Rachel said she understood. She signed the warning. What Marcus did not know, what Rachel had not mentioned, was that Rachel had begun 6 weeks earlier keeping a separate personal log. The log tracked one specific variable, the time each morning that Marcus arrived and unlocked the building entrance. Because the building only opened when Marcus arrived with the key, and Rachel had been arriving before Marcus for the better part of 2 months, standing at the locked door, technically unable to clock in. The log ran from Monday in September to the day she walked into HR, 7 months. 94 entries. Average delay, 11 minutes and 22 seconds. Longest delay, 43 minutes on a Tuesday in January. She did not bring the spreadsheet to Marcus. She did not mention it to her coworkers. She kept it in a folder on her personal laptop, updated it every morning, and waited. On the day she received her termination notice, her third late clock in, on a morning Marcus had arrived 19 minutes after opening time, she printed the spreadsheet, walked it to the HR office, and set it face down on the desk. She asked the HR coordinator to read it before she said another word about her own attendance record. The coordinator turned it over. She went very quiet. Then she picked up the phone. What happened next had nothing to do with Rachel's attendance. The HR department opened an investigation. Marcus was interviewed. The keycard entry logs, which Marcus had apparently not considered, confirmed every entry in Rachel's spreadsheet. Rachel's termination notice was voided. Marcus was demoted and transferred to a different facility. Rachel received a written apology from the regional director and a retroactive correction to her attendance file. She was at her desk by 8:47 the following Monday. Marcus's replacement arrived at 8:03. Her last line in the post, written 6 months after the incident. He told me one more time, and I was done. I just made sure I wasn't the one who was done. Rachel kept her log quietly for 7 months and only showed it when she had to. Our next narrator kept watching for 17 nights, and by the time she showed the footage to anyone, she wasn't sure she wanted to know what she'd found. This story comes from our /nosleep. The narrator doesn't give her name. She has been working from home since her company downsized 2 years ago. She lives alone. She posted this 8 months after the event she describes. Her home office is on the ground floor. A small room, a desk, a chair, a bookshelf, a window facing the back garden. She works there every day from 9 to 6. Every evening, she leaves the chair pushed in, the desk clear, the door half open. The first morning she noticed anything was a Tuesday in November. The chair had been rotated roughly 3 inches to the right. Not pulled out, turned on its axis, the way it would look if someone had been sitting in it and stood up to leave. She assumed she'd done herself. She pushed it back in and went to make coffee. The next morning, 3 inches to the right again. And the morning after that. By the 12th morning, she had checked the windows, changed the locks, and asked her neighbor to look through the back garden window after dark. The neighbor saw nothing. The windows stayed locked. The chair kept moving. On the 17th morning, she set up a camera. She positioned it in the corner of the room with a clear sight line to the chair, pressed record, and went to bed. On Thursday morning, she opened the footage on her kitchen table. Nothing moved for the first 2 hours. She fast-forwarded past midnight. Past 1. Past 2. At 3:21 a.m., the room was quiet and still. At 3:22 a.m., the chair turned. No hand on it. No person in the frame. The room perfectly empty. The chair rotating smoothly 3 inches and stopping, as if someone had just stood up to leave. She called her boyfriend and held the phone to the screen so he could watch. He watched it once. He watched it twice. Then he said, "Is that you in the corner?" She hadn't noticed. She went back to the beginning of the clip. In the bottom left corner of the frame, near the door, barely visible against the dark wall, a shadow, the edge of a shape, or the shape of someone standing very still. She went through the footage frame by frame. At 3:19 a.m., the shadow arrived. At 3:22 a.m., it crossed the room, stopped at the chair, and left. At 3:24 a.m., the room was empty. She called the doctor. The doctor referred her to a sleep clinic. The sleep clinic confirmed it within 2 sessions. Parasomnia, non rem sleep arousal disorder. She had been sleepwalking into her office, sitting in her chair, and returning to bed with no memory of it. Every night for 17 nights. The chair was moving because she was moving it. She had been in the room the whole time. Her last line in the post: "I was terrified of whatever was in my house. It was me. I'm honestly not sure that's better." She found out the thing she'd been afraid of was her own reflection. Our next narrator found something in a locked phone that turned out to be a reflection of a different kind, one that had been waiting 12 years to be heard. This story comes from our /AITAH. The narrator, we'll call him Daniel, was 38 when he posted. He had just spent 3 weeks clearing out his late mother's apartment. His mother had lived alone for the last 14 years of her life in a 1-bedroom apartment on the 2nd floor of a quiet building. She had been organized almost to a fault. Drawers labeled, files kept, every appliance in its original box. Near the end of the 3rd day, Daniel found a phone in the back of a kitchen drawer. An older model, still in its case. The charger was coiled neatly beside it. He plugged it in. When the lock screen appeared, it showed 1 notification. 47 voicemails. Unread. He had it unlocked through the carrier within the hour. All 47 messages were addressed to the same number. A number saved in his mother's contacts under a single name, Emma. Emma was Daniel's younger sister. She had cut off contact with the family 14 years earlier, after a conflict Daniel described as serious, but which he said was not his story to tell. He had not spoken to her since. His mother, as far as he had known, had not been in contact with her either. He listened to the first message, dated April 14th, 12 years earlier. His mother's voice, calm and quiet. She said it was Emma's birthday. She said she wasn't calling to relitigate anything. She said she just wanted her to know she was thinking of her. He listened to the next one, and the next. There were 47 messages spanning 11 years. Birthdays, holidays. One recorded the morning after a small earthquake that had been in the news. His mother saying she didn't know where Emma was living now, but she hoped she was safe. One left the week their father had been in the hospital, in case Emma might want to know. The last message was dated 9 days before his mother died. 3 minutes and 40 seconds. He listened to all of it. He sat in that apartment for a long time after that. Then he looked at the contact listing for Emma's number. Still in the phone, still current, as far as he could tell. And he had a decision to make that he didn't feel equipped to make alone. He posted to AITAH before he did anything else. Would he be wrong to call her? Would he be wrong to send the messages without asking first? More than 4,000 people responded within 12 hours. He called Emma. She answered on the third ring. He told her who he was. He told her what he'd found. She went very quiet. When she spoke again, she told him something he hadn't known. She had been checking her old voicemail, a different number from a phone she'd had in her 20s, regularly for 12 years. She had assumed the silence from their mother was intentional, a message of its own kind, that she had chosen not to reach out. She had no idea there was another phone. She had no idea about the 47 messages. She asked him to send all of them, Daniel's last lines, posted as an edit to his thread 2 weeks later. I asked AITAH for forwarding them without permission. The comments said no. I think my mom would have said the same thing. Emma called me on Sunday. We talked for 2 hours. That's the first time in 14 years. Daniel's mother kept calling for 11 years because she believed her daughter might still listen someday. Our next narrator received a letter from someone she had given up on and found out that the giving up had been, all along, the lesson. This story comes from our /TrueOffMyChest. The narrator, we'll call her Margaret, has taught high school English for 24 years. She posted this in the spring of last year. 19 years ago, Margaret failed a student. The student, we'll call him Kevin, was 16 and had submitted a short story for a creative writing assignment. It was good, unusually good. Margaret had read widely, and she recognized the story's opening paragraphs from a literary magazine she'd found in a used bookstore in the 90s, a small journal, out of print, not indexed anywhere online. She looked it up when she got home. The story was a word-for-word reproduction of a piece published in 1978. Kevin denied it. His parents called the principal. The principal reviewed the assignment, noted that the 1978 magazine was genuinely obscure, and gave Kevin a passing grade. He asked Margaret to document her findings and move on. She moved on. She kept a photocopy of the 1978 story and Kevin's submission in a manila folder. She put the folder in her bottom desk drawer. She thought about leaving teaching 3 times in the years that followed. Each time, she stayed. Last spring, near the end of March, she found a letter in her school mailbox. The return address was a literary agency in New York. Inside was a handwritten note on clean white paper. It was from Kevin. He used his full name, his real name, which she recognized immediately. In the first paragraph, he confirmed what she had suspected 19 years ago. He had plagiarized the story. He had been 16 and scared, and he had watched her be overruled, and he had gone home feeling like he had gotten away with something. He had never forgotten it. His debut novel had been published 8 months earlier. It had been on the New York Times bestseller list for 6 weeks. The rest of the letter, he said, was the reason he was writing. He had spent the 19 years after that assignment learning to write something real. Not because he had to, because he knew, at 16, that she knew. That knowledge had followed him. It had cost him something every time he sat down to write shortcut and stopped himself. You made it cost something, he wrote. That was the lesson I actually needed. Margaret read the letter twice. She put in the same manila folder as the 1978 short story and Kevin's original assignment. The folder is still in her bottom desk drawer. Her last lines in the post. I've thought about quitting 3 times since then. I still have the letter in the same folder as his old short story. It's still there. Margaret kept one piece of paper in a folder for 19 years, and it turned out to be exactly enough. Our final narrator kept a different kind of document, a single employment contract signed and filed away, and when the moment came, it was the only thing that mattered. This story comes from our /ProRevenge. The narrator, we'll call her Sandra, worked as a senior operations manager at a logistics company for 11 years. She posted this 14 months after the events concluded. Sandra had been hired in March of 2010 on a formal written employment contract. The contract was 12 pages long. She had read all of it before signing. She had kept her signed copy in a filing cabinet at home. In March of 2021, She was called into a meeting with HR and the company's chief operating officer. Her position, they said, was being eliminated. Nothing personal. The company was restructuring. She was offered a 6-week severance package and a non-disparagement agreement. They slid the documents across the table. Sandra thanked them, said she needed to review everything, and took the documents home. That evening, she sat at her kitchen table with 2 things in front of her: the severance agreement and her original employment contract from 2010. Section 7.4 of the employment contract stated that in the event of termination without cause, the employee was entitled to 90 days written notice or 90 days salary in lieu of notice. The severance agreement offered 6 weeks. Sandra did not sign anything that night. 2 weeks later, after Sandra had retained an employment attorney, the company sent a revised packet and a letter from their legal department. The letter stated that the 6-week severance represented the company's full contractual obligation, that the non-disparagement agreement was non-negotiable, and that Sandra had 5 business days to sign or forfeit all severance. Sandra read the letter. Her attorney read the letter. Then Sandra's attorney sent a single reply. The reply cited Section 7.4 of the employment agreement dated March 12, 2010, noted that the company appeared to be in breach of its own contractual terms, and requested that the company produce its signed copy of the original employment agreement for cross-reference. 3 days passed. On the 4th day, the company's attorney called. He said, in the words Sandra later quoted in her post, "We seem to be having difficulty locating our copy of the original agreement." Sandra's attorney responded that this was regrettable, but that Sandra had retained her copy for 11 years and would be happy to provide it as evidence in the event the matter proceeded to arbitration. The matter did not proceed to arbitration. Final settlement: 90 days salary in lieu of notice, $34,500, plus the original 6-week severance of $8,200, plus reimbursement of Sandra's legal fees of $11,000. Total, $53,700. The non-disparagement agreement, in its final signed form, was mutual. Her last lines in the post: "They told me they'd lost the contract. I told them I hadn't." That's the whole story. 5 stories. A payroll log that took 7 months to build. A camera that solved the wrong mystery. 47 messages on a phone in a kitchen drawer. A manila folder that waited 19 years. And a filing cabinet that outlasted a company's own records department. If any of these stayed with you, share it with someone. And if you haven't subscribed yet, we do this every week. 5 more stories next Friday. I'll see you then.